Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The latest edition of the Congressional Innovation Scorecard grades every member of Congress on how strongly they champion American inventors, creators, and the innovation economy. It's created by the Council for Innovation Promotion, or C4IP. For the results, we welcome one of the contributors. David Kappos is a partner at Cravath, Swaine and Moore and co-chair of C4IP. He's also former head of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you, Eric.
All right, so let's kind of just get a background of this scorecard itself. What does it aim to do, and how do you go about grading the senators and congressmen that are actually included in it?
Yeah, so great questions. The scorecard aims to assess objectively as possible, every member of Congress, House and Senate, R&D, on the same criterion in order to determine and report to the members themselves, and most importantly to the American people and voters, the track record of each member in standing up for strong and effective intellectual property rights as a means for standing up for innovation in our country.
All right, and so looking at the scorecard itself, over half of Congress received a grade of C or lower on IP issues. What can you tell me about what went into those decisions, and does that mean that everybody has room for improvement, so to speak?
A lot of members, most members have room for improvement, that's for sure. So the way the scorecard works is that we take every vote that every member makes on a bill that in some significant way relates to intellectual property, every floor statement they make, every press release, we comb through their websites, speeches, everything that relates to intellectual property that the member does during the year. And we rate that plus or minus, positive or negative. Some bills, of course, that are more centrally about intellectual property get scored higher. Other bills that just have small IP components in them still get scored, but a bit less so. And then we add up the scores and each member gets a grade. And as you say, Eric, a bit unfortunately, most members rate in somewhere in the like C plus range. On the plus side, the average grade did go up a little bit this year. And in both the Senate and the House, we do have some A pluses, some members who are, and both R&D side. So this is not, something that either party has a lock on. But there are some members who've gotten extraordinarily great grades because these members really believe that innovation drives American national security, jobs, economic growth, global leadership, and they understand that in order to have innovation flourish in the U.S., we must have a strong and effective intellectual property system. So, Eric, they get that equation that if you're for innovation, you have to be for strong and effective intellectual property rights. And it's those members who wind up scoring well.
Yeah, let's give a shout out to the members who received those better grades. Senators Chris Coons and Tom Tillis are noted as IP champions. Were there specific actions that obviously you don't need to go if you need to go off the top of your head, but were there specific actions that members can take that actually show that they do care about this and push forward everything that you just talked about? Right.
Yeah. So, taking as an example, Senators Tillis and Coons, who are fantastic champions for IP. And there's others. Mazie Hirono of Hawaii comes to mind, in addition to some others who are great on the Senate side. So what did they do? They co-sponsored important pro-intellectual property legislation, meaning pro-innovation legislation. They've spoken broadly and widely on the importance of strong and effective intellectual property rights. They've opposed bills and measures that would degrade, diminish, damage the intellectual property system. So they've been all in, if you will, for strong and effective IP rights.
Gotcha. All right. We're speaking with David Kappos. He is a partner at Cravath, Swaine and Moore. He's also the co-chair of the Council for Innovation Promotion. And Let's just kind of get an overview of this issue overall in Congress. You had mentioned how part of the job of C4IP is to inform the voters on who really is for innovation and intellectual property in Congress. Working in a niche news industry myself, some of the issues that tend to be higher up on our list aren't necessarily in the average American voters list at all, really. But, for something like this, is that part of the job of C4IP as well, to kind of bring that connection to, no, you should care about this because this does end up affecting things you do care about?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So look, we're in there to help members who'd like to improve their scores, and to the great credit of a number of members, we've had outreach. This is the second year of the scorecard, Eric. So, we now have a couple of data points, so you could start, putting lines between them, so to speak. And we've seen some members improve, which is great. And we've seen some members who want to improve. And we're in there to help them, to talk about, what they can do in order to improve their score, but more importantly, to improve their championing of innovation, right? At the end of the day, the scorecard is all about measuring members' track record relative to promoting innovation. We talk to many members, and every member of Congress, if asked, are you pro-innovation? Would you like to see more innovation in your district? Do you believe the U.S. should be the world's innovation leader? Every single member will reflexively say, absolutely, yes, 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 yes. But the thing that many members don't understand is that link between innovation and intellectual property. Intellectual property is the only system we have. Copyrights, patents, trademarks, trade secrets. That's the only system we have for supporting, enhancing, encouraging innovation. That's it. So if you are for innovation, you must be for strong and effective intellectual property rights. And it's members who are reaching out and saying, hey, look, I am for innovation. I want to know how I can be better on IP so that I can be better on innovation. We love working with them.
Actions speak louder than words. The report card actually mentions a few key IP bills, such as the Patent Eligibility Restoration Act and the Prevail Act. They're both highlighted in there. What are your views on these bills, and what is the purported impacts that they could have on IP and innovation in the long run?
Yeah, so the Patent Eligibility Restoration Act, or PERA, introduced by Senator Tillis and reintroduced in this term of Congress. So it's already had hearings, it's had lots of discussion has gone on about it. That bill would simply correct some problematic Supreme Court decisions from the last decade, actually, mostly when I was in the government, and restore broad eligibility for things like life sciences diagnostics. So like medical treatments, medical diagnostics that are not eligible for patent protection now, but need to be eligible, because the U.S. is not doing enough research and development in the diagnostics area. Why? Because we don't have patent protection for that area. Other countries do. Europe, China, et cetera, broadly protect life sciences diagnostics. So companies invest in research there. We need investment in life sciences diagnostics in the U.S., and PERA will help restore that. So that's PERA. The other one you mentioned, Eric, is Prevail. That is a bill about fixing some issues with the court inside the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office that assesses patents that have been granted. That court was put in place back when I was in the government during the Obama administration, and we've learned a lot about some things that work well and some other things that don't work well. Prevail will fix those things that don't work well, so that called the PTAB, the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, this court within the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, so that it can live up to its original vision that Congress set forth when it was passed into law in 2011.
Yeah, Congress still has its work cut out for it involving these issues. Am I right? I mean, you've got generative AI sitting out there that everybody is waiting for some sort of federal say-so on that matter and how it affects this industry itself. I know I'm asking you to break down a very complicated issue in 30 seconds, but if you could give it your best shot, you're the former head of PTO, right? So you're the person to ask.
Yeah, very briefly on AI, it is super important, Eric. And to the benefit and the credit of Congress, they haven't over-legislated on AI. The Europeans have over-legislated. They've got the EU AI Act. It is too heavyweight in terms of regulation. The U.S. has not done that. I think to the credit of the U.S. so far, as you say, Congress has not passed really any broad AI legislation. That probably will continue under the current administration, which wants to take a let all the flowers bloom approach. And so the only issue is really whether the states will be permitted to continue with legislation. You're probably aware that the huge tax reform bill that's working its way through the Senate right now would preempt state legislation on AI for 10 years. So that's got to be debated. And whether that goes through or not will determine whether the states can exercise federalism while the federal government hangs back for a while.
Eventually, it's going to come to a head, though, right? Because generative AI is really just citing other people's work in the long run. How are we going to break down which levels of where intellectual property lines are actually stated and, the proper quotations and citations are made? Or is that just getting too far into the weeds and, we need to wait a little while?
Well, it's a great question, but the lawsuit that Disney filed against Stable Diffusion just the other day is another good example, in addition to the Getty Images lawsuits, the New York Times lawsuits. So this is one, Eric, where our legal system is working and it works, and the courts are going to help us sort out where those tricky dividing lines are.
Paperwork. Now we're getting somewhere. David Kappos is a partner with Cravath, Swaine and Moore. He's also the co-chair of the Council for Innovation Promotion and former head of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Thank you so much for taking the time and giving us some knowledge on this topic.
Yeah, my pleasure, Eric.